calling to order. Thank you all for being here. Do I have a motion on the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Okay. Public comment?
No.
Okay. So, portrait of a graduate is first up.
Yes, so I brought copies of what I had shared with the committee members, and I'll just pass these around. I tried to make these big so that the font was large enough to see, because they tend to print a little small. But the yellow column is the current version that we've got in place. And if you want to just take a minute to review that again, we've got 6 different sections. The first section covers the academic expectations of our graduate. Lifelong learner who demonstrates proficiency in core academic content and real-world skills, exhibits future-oriented abilities based on Sanborn's definition of student success, plans continually for his or her future. The next section talks about a responsible individual who takes personal accountability for their thoughts and actions, makes healthy choices to achieve well-being, acts with integrity, honesty, empathy, and humility. The third section is a creative innovator who adapts and is flexible, applies critical thinking, problem-solving, and decision-making skills, thinks originally and independently to arrive at a resolution. Next section, an engaged citizen who contributes respectfully to their personal, digital, and global communities, collaborates effectively to achieve goals, shows awareness of diversity in the global marketplace. An effective communicator who expresses thoughts and ideas clearly, concisely, and logically in various ways, accepts and considers constructive feedback, listens actively to other perspectives and asks questions to learn and go deeper. And finally, a resilient learner who rises to challenges, asks for help, views mistakes as an opportunity for growth. And that's where we are, and you can see the progression from where we started in August after we had pulled together all the information from the various stakeholder groups, and then the subsequent revisions to where we are today.
So I have a question.
Okay.
It's still not clear to me when we talk about portrait of a graduate and informing the curricula and how all this ties together. This to me is still, okay, so I did some research on it, where it came from and who the guy that's supporting it and funding it, and it doesn't particularly fall into any ideological or other bent that I could find in terms of looking at it, but it still not clear to me how this ties into, and this will inform our curriculum, I think was the word that was used.
Mm-hmm.
Is there can you explain somehow as to how that all comes together? Because I don't see the connection.
I give you a thought that you want to know why you send us to conferences. Sometimes it's, you get a nugget or 5 out of it. And we saw a gentleman from Michigan, and Brian knows everybody's name, so he can tell you who he is, who talked, they had 4 in the airports for graduate, 4 areas, which is why when I saw the extra one come on, I was kind of groaning, because it makes the challenge a little more, but I understand why it's there. And what they've done is they've aligned all of their course competencies and all of their courses to one of their 4 core, they use a different term, it's ideals or something like that. And so one thought I had would be to, in the process of at some point in life, rewriting all the competencies at the high school level at least, to try to make them line up both vertically and horizontally a little better, was to look at putting each of those competencies into one of these areas. And what they do is they color code. So they're, red, yellow, green, purple, whatever that is. And then line them up so that you sort of look to broadly work your kids or have your kids experience their education and apply to as many of these or all of them in some broad brush way. And I think that's something that I'm not entirely sure we're currently doing well, which is to make sure that our kids are getting, a sort of leveled, or at least some differences to the comfort level of how we're doing across a variety of areas such as this. So we could say, you know, in English, their sophomore English class, they're working on a unit about foods, and I'm just sort of literally talking off the top of my head about what they're doing right now. And that would work to things like being creative. They have to communicate to, they're basically selling a new food lunch item to the cafeteria ladies or even to their class or just to their teacher. You know, they have to do that. And those pieces would all fit within, so each competency that we touch on would have some tie into that. So I think that's kind of what it's for. One way it would tie into the curriculum to answer your question.
We haven't done the visual.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah.
We haven't done the visual piece, which I think will also help, because I think to some extent, this is meant to be a rallying point or a beacon for parents, community, everybody, just so that they understand what our purpose is and what our mission is across the board, across the system. So what we come up with for a visual, I think, will matter, because we all know a picture will speak 1,000 words, right? So not that all of this detail might end up in the final visual. There might be one version that's a little more succinct that just has the headers, and then another piece that expands out. I don't know. We haven't dissected that piece yet. But definitely some curriculum revision work as a result of this, that vertical articulation across the K-12 system, looking at how we start doing these things at early grade levels, because if we're expecting lifelong learners, those habits have to start in kindergarten, earlier than that. But I don't know that our first grade teachers are mindful of those things, right? Not necessarily.
The other thing that I see is that it also helps us to guide our professional development, so that when we're looking at a teacher comes to us and says, I'd like to attend this conference, and we're like, okay, well, where does that fit? How does that help us? Where's that going to help our kids achieve? So it kind of helps to make those decisions as well. I would imagine at district level, as well as thinking about, okay, we're sorely lacking in creative, innovative. We've got our great art teachers, but maybe some of our other teachers need to learn to be more creative in the math world, and how can you be creative with math? And so we might look for professional development in that area.
This is meant to serve also as a complement to the definition of student success. So I'm seeing this as being a pamphlet where you've got the actual definition of student success, which is all those quantitative measures that I report out in the annual report. But this would be on the other side of that, to give a full picture of the whole child or the whole student. So that you're not only getting the quantitative measures of the test scores, but you're also getting some of these other skills that our community members who are owners of businesses, who when they contributed to these conversations talked about needing to see this in their employees. How are we ensuring that the students that we produce are not just able to know things, but also know how to convey information, being able to address problems if a customer comes into a company, for instance. We had one person who was very clear about, you know, people coming into work and they'll hire part-time people over the summer. They sit there and they wait for them to tell them what to do next, instead of taking the initiative to, okay, I'm gonna spend some time on rearranging this or cleaning that up. It's broader picture with that, with what we're trying to do to make sure that the students that we are educating, we're educating across a continuum.
So let's take that for a minute, just to see if I'm getting it. So you just illustrated a point where somebody doesn't take the initiative, they just kind of sit back and waiting for something else. How do you then develop a curriculum saying, I'm going to change that by, and then making the determination that little Jimmy or little Sue came in and was not engaged to try to do the next thing, and now they are. I have a hard time visualizing how that comes through.
And that's in conversations that parents would have with teachers over their progress on things. So this would be reported out, and so the next step would be for us, once we have a complete portrait and the board approves the portrait, is for us to go ahead and break this apart into a progression. So what do we expect, say, a K2 student to do? What's the range of skills? 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and then up at the high school, or some other kind of form like that. And so if we have a task that goes on in class, and I'm teaching that child, and we sit down at conference time, or, you know, there's some sort of a note that gets put into the grading system, which we'll talk about in a bit, talking about, you know, well, this time, you know, Sam was not able to do this, or Sam had to come and get me to direct him to what to do next. So the parent would be then engaged in some of those conversations with their child about, okay, next time you need to try to do this, so that it's not just the teacher trying to figure out how to move that child, but it's through conversations and through repeated practice to get that child to where they go. Because if you tell somebody what they need to improve on, they're gonna work on it. Same thing like when you go to the doctor, they tell you, well, geez, you know, your cholesterol numbers are too high. You're gonna think about, well, geez, maybe I need to change what I'm eating. Maybe there's, you know, vitamins I need to take, something like that. So it's through those conversations that the teachers would have, just as regular conversations that they normally would with the children, and also with their parents and guardians. So it's not going to happen just one-sided.
So the purpose of developing a portrait of a graduate is to make everyone more mindful of where we
Exactly,
want to end up at the end of the 12-year period of time.
exactly. This is buy-in from the
And
community.
identify what we're gonna do if they're not there, to Jamie's point, along the way, because for some of these, I don't know how we might measure that. That's where I think we need to pull in the right people to come up with what those tools are going to be.
And some of them, you know, they're challenging in more than just how do you educate a child.
Correct.
I want the child to be personally responsible for their thoughts. People could jump off all kinds of cliffs in all kinds of directions with that kind of statement.
Yeah.
I could do that.
I mean, I would visualize that in some way. Somebody else could visualize it in another way. So I could visualize it with, you know, it's not somebody else in your head, it's you, you're controlling your own thoughts. Somebody else could visualize it as, these are the only thoughts that are the right thoughts to have.
Right.
So, I mean, it's tenuous to see how that bundles and how that pulls to what you want. So I don't think there's anything here reading that you'd say, why in the hell would we want anybody to be honest?
Right.
And why do we care if they have any integrity? I mean, they don't.
Yeah. But
it doesn't.
You
They're not
want
right.
But
there's not something that
I'll let Ellie handle
that
that.
calls to that. But then how do you instill that? How do you
right.
how
So
do you do that?
so whenever I'm asked a question like this, I ask myself, what would it look like for my son? Because I have to put a kid in the mix. And for me, when it's my kid, I go to the heart level. So I'm thinking about my younger son right now because he's kind of still at that 11-year-old, kind of still cute, but a little bit growing into himself and figuring out his zones. And I'm thinking about each of these things, right, as a parent. And so I'm thinking to myself, if I were sitting at a teacher conference and you handed me this pamphlet and you said to me, this is what you, and you'll see in the Gradebook in a minute what that's all about, but it's linked, right, because it's parent communication. I'm thinking to myself, what the heck does all this mean to me as a dad of David in a parent conference about his grades? Because that's really where the rubber hits the road. And it hits the road annually for 12 years, right? So I'm going to that's the context, okay? So the way I would look at this is I would like a teacher to say to me, hey, Tom, you know, David's doing really well. We know that when he's in high school, he's going to need to meet this criteria to be considered to be successful. And so in math, he's working on this, which is going to lead him to this direction with math, and he's doing okay there. He's doing pretty good and really good in reading. He clearly loves it because he's got his reading book out during math, right? And he hates writing, right? Because if you ask him to write something, he'll write 3 sentences and say, I told you what I meant. That's my David, right? So then they could say to me, you know, we see a lot of strengths around what we want him to know and be able to do at the end of his high school experience. We know that he needs to be a lifelong learner. He loves to read. He's doing great on that front. But we're kind of concerned about him planning continually for his future because he doesn't see the connection between writing and his success in the future. Mm-hmm. When we ask him to do something with it, he's stuck there. We need to work on that as a team, right? And then if they look at him being a responsible individual, he gets defensive. He doesn't always take personal accountability. When we ask him to write more, he gets defensive. We're concerned about that. But he'll tell you what he loves to read. So you can see that it's different from subject to subject. when you think about him being creative, he really isn't that flexible right now at 11 years old. He's not adapting because if he doesn't like it, he doesn't want to do it. That's something that we should work on. But on the other side, he really does apply critical thinking and problem solving and decision making because it shows up when he talks to us about his reading, that he's thinking about all of this. And it shows up when he does math. So we can see it here, but we're not seeing it here. It's not black and white. David comes to school every day and he's respectful with everyone. Kids love him. He has tons of friends. He collaborates with everybody else to get things done. That's never a problem for David. And he shows awareness of the kids around him, if not the global workplace yet, but we recognize that that's a future further down the road goal. But in terms of the class structure, he does well with that. He communicates well in terms of verbal communication, but his writing is really a challenge. And he does listen really well to other perspectives. So he's in 6th grade, right? I'm giving you the 6th grade picture. In terms of resiliency, he does really well when it's reading and math, but he does not rise to challenges in writing. And those are really concerning things for him in the future. And so as a parent, I would want you to know that our vision for what he needs to be able to do is apply these skills equally across every area, not just one area or 2 areas that he likes. So the nugget for him to work on right now is really grit, right? You don't like this, you don't like doing it, you don't want to do it, but you could summarize it in grit. And that will then on the flip side be an issue. If this was our document and I could flip it over and look at the criteria for what he would need to do, I'd be concerned about his SAT score someday in writing. Because even if he can read it and understand it, he has to be able to articulate it. That would then be a concern in his NWEA scores because you have to be able to do different processes in the NWEA to get an accurate picture. So I would say for David, we kind of have a real concern about writing. Let's talk about that and what we can get him for help. That's when the intervention clicks in, right? Now, the other side of it is, now I'm going to put on the teacher hat. So the teacher's getting ready for this conference with David, with David and me. The teacher's thinking, we have a workshop model of instruction that fosters all of these things. That's what workshop teaching is. It teaches people to be independent, to solve problems, and if they don't do well in that classroom management structure, we have to scaffold for them, which means we give them more structured activities until we can release them to be more independent, right? So this, it's a lot to talk about. I know exactly how all of these things happen in a really responsive classroom that does the right thing, and there is literally a program called Responsive Classroom that we use to teach kids the correct behaviors. The question that I have is a deeper level. What do we do when they don't do it? What do we do when they don't do it well? Because what we've learned is that if kids learn solid routines and expectations in kindergarten and get into habits in school, they do way better if the routines and habits are similar K to 12. If they change every year, it's tough. So like when you have a school district that has islands of excellence, you want Johnny to have so-and-so in 1st grade because so-and-so teacher is awesome. We want every 1st grade teacher to be awesome and have similar routines and habits because we know that if they have that and then 2nd grade has it, the likelihood of them succeeding in 2nd grade is way higher. That sets the foundation for all of this in the classroom day to day. So Jamie, the application is deep. It's more than just writing down a list of values that we have about things. It's putting it into our daily routines in classrooms and then assessing whether or not kids adapt to it. But it's not, the way that this becomes data-driven happens in one primary way, but there are multiple, okay? But I'll give a simple one for the sake of tonight. The data gets collected when a child struggles. So what we do is when a child struggles behaviorally in school, we want to start looking at, the first thing we look at is how is the teacher's classroom management? Are their routines strong? Is there consistency? Are there clear expectations? Does the kid feel cared about and supported while held to a high level of expectations, right? The tone versus the expectations can be 2 very different things. And then we say, okay, so what specific areas is the child struggling in behaviorally? And then we have to analyze that because behavior is 100% predictable, always. I can tell you when my son is going to melt down with precision. And that's what Ross taught us, was that you can predict those things. Once you can predict those things, then you can start to do something about them. So the data really gets collected more on a formal level when someone's struggling with some of these areas. Another formal level that it gets collected on is through assessments. So the assessment data in our program, as we have units that we're looking at, each unit will have assessments that will show us different pieces of this and where they are. And the subject matter does vary as to what you'll see in this definition. So for example, you're gonna see more of the humanities side in writing, and you're gonna see more of the routine and calculation side and the math side. And in the reading, you see it when they can't learn their sight words and they don't persevere to learn them. So if a kid is struggling with their sight words in first grade and they don't know them, there's a huge difference between the kid who doesn't know them and they're working really hard to learn them, and the kid who's like, okay, this is bad. Like, I don't like this, right? And so those are different ways that will show up. I think we often think of this verbiage as 12th grade or what we want them to do at the end. I want to make sure everyone understands that this is very closely linked to the habits that you would need to achieve the academic side. It's not one or, it's and. You have to have it both. They work like this. So that's my thought on this. And the part of the same work that we have to do to splay out the curriculum backward plan, which we're going to talk about with math in a minute, has to happen with this. And it should happen, we want it to happen at the same time, which is why we're staying right on this. Because we want the work to happen comorbid so that the habits are happening simultaneously.
Based on what you just said, it'd be my perception, and if I'm looking to validate that or have it said no I'm wrong, that is a step function differential to teachers' interactions and parent-teacher conferences to get into that type of a detail level with that type of a feedback system that they can tie it to something other than, well, yeah, you just don't like Johnny because you've always been that, right? You didn't like his sister Kathy either, right?
Right on. That's it.
You know, what you're defining would seem very different than what I perceive to be what the normal interaction phase is in parent-teacher conferences. Even just given the time slots that are allotted for parent-teacher conferences.
And we'll talk about the parent communication piece when we talk a little bit more about the gradebook system, because there's shifts. I feel like tonight's meeting is just this great big tied up group of things, because it's all connected. But you'll see differences in the communication that's going to come out in the new gradebook system, because there's going to be a lot more communication. It's going to be more ongoing. It's not just going to be, here's the midterm report card, boom, here it is, and like you've never heard of this before. It's more ongoing. So all of this sort of has to happen together, like Tom was saying, so that we can make sure that the whole system is working together. You don't want to do one piece and have something be too far ahead, and then the other thing you're trying to make it catch up, because it's not going to work. But the gradebook is going to help with the communication piece as well. So that it's not just going to be a one and done kind of, here's the information, see you later, Charlie, kind of thing.
And I'd just like to quickly add to that, because I want to keep going. Jamie, I would agree with everything that you just said, that we're raising the expectations for how teachers communicate to parents. But really, ultimately, we're hoping that the students do student-led conferences where they're telling you how they're doing well on these things and what they're working on. Because really, ultimately, they own it. Yeah. Right? So the hope is that as we evolve this, it will evolve along with the student exhibition component that we've started to work on, where at the end of their senior year, a panel will listen to their presentation about their student exhibition, and all of these things will be a component of the work that they present as to evidence as to how they met these things. Right? I know that academics are important. Scores are important, particularly with math, right? It's a problem. But honestly, if you don't have these, you can't get that done. You can't. There's no way. This is the prerequisite to the academic component, because you can't work in the world of work if you can't deal with the things that are in this list. I mean, I have to say that when this first came out, I was even a little bit like, I don't know if I love the wording in this, but I'm really happy with where this is right now. Like, I really feel like the language is right on. The question is, how do you assess it? What's the rubric? That's the next step in the work. We have to agree on this first and then do that work. Just like the definition of student success, and just like the math conversation we're going to have in a minute.
The one unknown, as usual, is the parent, because if the parent isn't engaged with the school and in fostering these types of skill sets, the kid's screwed.
Habits.
And we have no control over that.
And the employers are looking for all of these things. This is what they care about the most. They tell us that They told us when they were at the focus session, they tell us every month when I go to chamber meetings, these are the things I'm reminded of. It's the people skills, it's the executive functioning skills, it's just, those are the pieces that they feel as employers, like they can't teach. You're either good at that or you're not. Heck, we see it here when we hire people, right?
Yeah.
Let's be honest, most of the people that don't work out here, it's not because they don't have command of the content in the classroom. It's generally the other things. We call them the professional skills. But it matters. It matters. That's where the productivity comes in.
I think it's both. You have to have both.
Well, yeah.
I'm not correcting you, I'm just
Yeah,
adding, I'm adding.
Yeah.
It's both.
I think the employers
Yeah,
always
yeah.
take it that you got the diploma, we know you have the academics. This is the stuff we care about because schools generally don't teach those things.
Well, it was interesting because I met with Pam the other day and I was talking to her about this, Dr. Brown. And I showed her this just to see what she thought. And she said that she thought it was way better. But what she really loved was linking it. That the two things are connected, that they're in one document, not a separate document that could be perceived as one being more important to the other. And making sure that whatever the document is that we use is clearly illustrates that the two things are coexist and are linked. And I think that, you know, I am open to waiting to bring this to the board until that is clear and completed for everyone to review as a unified document, if that is the will of this group. I don't want you to, I mean, we'd like to get this approved because we want to get to work. But if waiting a few weeks and putting it in with the definition of student success and making one brochure would help the process, we're open to that. That's why we're here tonight. We put it on the agenda tonight, we can take it off if we don't want to talk about it, right? Like this isn't.
My thought on that is more process than content.
Mhm.
It's difficult being in this committee and reviewing something and then 15 minutes later walking into a board meeting and having the same discussion and then being expected to vote on it. You've had no time
The process.
to think it through,
Makes sense.
to process it, to provide feedback, to ask questions. It just seems,
Rush.
well, yeah, you know, and you get a feeling that it's being forced, and then you get
Sure.
your hackles up and your defenses up. But wait a minute, I didn't have proper time to review this, so I'm
Thanks for
gonna
bringing
be
that up.
more critical on this and say I don't really want to do this now because I haven't had time to let it gel.
Okay. And that's why I was saying that it's important to note that we put it on the agenda because the agenda was light tonight, but we knew if this meeting didn't feel like, if you guys said this is great, we love it, then that's fine. But if you want time to process, there's no rush here.
It
This
has
is
to be
about
done
doing
right.
this right. This
Yeah.
needs to be done right, okay? But we wanted to we've worked so hard on it, we've been over and over and over it, we didn't know exactly where we were,
Mhm.
right, with regard to the.
And once it is approved, we have a lot more work to do on the other end to start unpacking it and building all of the other pieces that go with this so that when someone's not rising to challenges, we have a toolbox of things that we can use with kids to help them with that, and parents have that. So there's a lot of work ahead too. You know, again, all the reason that it has to be done right this first time.
To me, and maybe it's just me and just not as clued in as others. This is the most meat I've heard in this discussion on Portrait of a Graduate since we started talking about it. The discussion around.
Good, that's what we want. And some of that's because you've asked good questions.
Right.
Right? Like it's not, that's what happens. People ask questions, we clarify. So do you want to give this, what's the will of the three of you? Would you like us to table this for tonight and come up with the final, like, what I like to call pretty document? Remember when we did the thing for the realtors, the document for the realtors, and we talked about what we were going to put in there, and then Brian did that cool little mock-up, and I brought it to you all before we sent it to the printers. Would you like it at that level before it goes to the board and do one more E.I.S.A meeting and put it on the board agenda in April? Would that feel better? Or do you feel like this language is kind of where you want it to be, understanding that it's going to be in relationship to the definition of student success and all linked, and obviously the board will approve the final document as well? I'm just asking you for guidance. What would you like to do?
I wouldn't be prepared to vote on this as a
Okay.
board member later on.
Mhm.
Like, as JD said, just having seen it, but I guess I would appreciate as a board member having this sort of a discussion. Why are we doing this? I like those those steps along the way rather than, hey, here you go,
Mhm.
oh,
Yeah,
at
yeah.
the very end.
So are you saying that you think that we should share this with the board tonight and discuss it? So that we can get feedback and then bring it back
That
again?
would be my feeling.
I would suggest that because just to go along with my colleagues, they need time to read it, digest it, think about it, filter it, ask questions.
Okay.
And then take action on it. I would not want the board to vote on it tonight, having just read it for the first time. That's not fair.
So they did receive it last week, and we did ask them to send us questions by Monday, and no one did.
Right.
So it's not like
I have never seen this before.
you didn't get,
I
I-
haven't.
Patty sent it to you last
I
Friday.
sent it to
I
everybody.
don't have it.
Yeah,
Jim
no, I got your
responded.
email.
Jim
Yeah,
responded.
Jim
One of
responded.
the other board members told
Yeah,
me
but
that
I
he
got
had
that
received
from
it, but I
Patty
do
last
not
week.
have it.
Okay, can you double check your email, please, because I need to know if
I
there's,
already searched for it.
okay, because there's a problem with our system if that's the case, because Patty sent it Friday at my
Mhm.
direction.
Yeah,
For that explicit reason, I was kind of confused, Tammy, when you were
Guys
saying.
don't get it.
I got it.
Thursday the 6th at 10 a.m. it was sent to everybody on the board.
Yeah, we would never send it out today or
No.
bring it here and then just do that. Oh,
Absolutely not.
God, no.
No.
That'd be awful.
Well, I see that I'm on it, but I don't have it, so.
Can you check your spam?
I checked, I searched.
I have it right
Search for
here
it.
in my, I did get it.
Okay,
Yeah, I've got it here.
all right, I'll contact tech and find out what's going on, Tammy. That is very odd. Because it's a group, the
Mhm.
SRSD school board, so
I
you're
mean,
in
I'm
the,
looking at Jamie's email and
Yeah,
I
her
see my,
name's
I see
listed.
my name there, but so I
I'm
looked
sorry.
for it because
I'm
someone
very
else told me
sorry.
they had gotten it, so I specifically went and looked.
Yep.
So. At any rate,
that is a technical issue, I'm very sorry.
But receiving it and having a discussion are two different things.
Mhm.
Because your example with David was terrific.
Okay,
Because for me as a non-parent, that really kind of put everything right into perspective.
Mhm.
So,
I'll share that with the board tonight and we can have a conversation and
Mhm.
just, I'm sorry you didn't get the email, Tammy. We did send it, that's really odd, and I'll look into that right away. Can you forward the email to Bob Vicker and say,
I will do
Tammy,
that.
no, you
Yep.
did not receive this, and
Yep.
CC Gordon?
Yep.
That's really odd.
hey, Tammy, you're the first name on the list here.
I see that.
Okay.
So for tonight, certainly, we wouldn't ask, if the board just, our plan tonight was to have, we thought everyone had read it, reflected on it, and sent Patty questions. So Jim sent her questions, I talked to Pam, clearly you didn't get it, the two of you did, but maybe didn't have time to unpack
I
and
looked
think
at
about
it, but looking at it doesn't do it for me.
Yeah. So I'm gonna do the spiel I just
I got
did
more on it
tonight.
tonight.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
didn't
I'll do
read
that
it.
tonight, right, I'll do the same thing tonight,
Think that was
and then we'll give it a couple of weeks to sit on it, and then we'll come back to it.
So this will still be on our agenda
Yeah,
at our board meeting, okay,
yeah, sounds good, is that good for you?
yes.
Yeah, just
And
for
I'm
discussion
concerned that
tonight.
we're bleeding into Patty's gradebook system report time.
Yeah, yeah,
So I think we should move on.
yes, I agree, thank you, gavel.
Okay, gradebook update. So we met again with Motivus, which is the company that's working on the gradebook system, on January 31st. And we actually had two separate meetings. We had a meeting with them with the secondary group, which was the high school, middle school folks, and then a second meeting with the elementary folks, looking at what the teachers are doing, how they're experiencing the system from the user end, what's going on. A lot of good feedback, and Brian, feel free to jump in because you were there too. A lot of good feedback came from them, and a lot of good suggestions as far as how to improve some of the usability of the actual software. So just usability type things as far as teachers being able to quickly enter things instead of having to go through multiple clicks to get in and put things in there. And they did also preview for us some things that are going to be coming out. We'll be meeting with them again in March at some point to see what these are. And one of them, and I know Tom was very excited about this, was a graph that would show a student's progress in relation to other students in that grade level. So I know Tom has talked about, is my child on benchmark or grade level? How's the rest of the class doing? So that you could see, so that if your child is like, let's say at a level 40 or something, and all the other students are at a level 30, then that's looking good. If they're at a 40 and everyone else is at a 70, you kind of would get a quick snapshot of that.
What was cool is it was a bar, it was like a
It was
curve,
like, yeah,
you know,
line
it
graph.
showed where the student that you're getting the report is on that curve, and then it showed the rest of the class without identifying anyone. And the teacher doesn't have to do a thing, it just would print in that subject area.
That's helpful.
I've wanted that
Yep.
for 10 years,
Yep.
right? And it was just fantastic that it was done so simply with no effort on part of the teacher. They
There's
just
a,
print the report and it shows.
there's a way that teachers can go in and put notes or comments on separate tasks, and I'm using the word tasks to mean it could be a classroom assignment, could be a test, could be anything, but they could put
Could be
notes
this.
on that. Could be notes that are assigned to entire sections of work, so just like on the whole content area, you could put bigger notes, and all of those notes and all that communication would be aggregated according to this system by area. So if you're looking for notes about science, all those notes would be together instead of having to hunt all over the place. So parents could look at the progress of their child. There's going to be a way for all of the assessments to be pulled together so that you could see how that child's doing on those assessments, as well as how they're doing in relation to what they've done before on similar assessments that have assessed similar things. So let's say in September, they had a test that was talking about a certain competency with fractions and they did really well. October comes, it's not so well. You could see that trajectory separately instead of having to scroll back through and figure out, okay, where was the last time you were tested on this? It's all gonna show up in one screen for parents to see as well as for teachers and kids to see. And they're also looking at adding, and this is one of the coming features, a way to have work accessed from the parent view so that if a parent looks at a score, they could see the score for that assignment, click on it and see a sample of the actual work that was done with the rubric, with notes in there from the teacher of, this is why you got this grade, instead of just, this is your grade and there's some mystery. You get to see the work, you get to see the comments, you get to see where that score was in the rubric, and it's very clear, and it's you can either do a very quick cursory view of the student's work, or you can click in multiple levels down to see more details, more details, more details. So it's very exciting what we've got coming.
And,
Brian, I don't know if there's
I just
something
want to
else
chime in
I
on
missed.
that. I met with them too, and I told them, I wanted, again, using David, I want to know three things. Is David doing okay in terms of benchmarks, right? And for us, that needs to be regular 6 to 8 week units, not, I don't want to find out 4 months from now that he's not doing well, right? I want to know in real time, every 6 to 8 weeks, where he's at. And then underneath that, a narrative about what we can do to support him, even if he's, way above everyone else. Everybody needs support and growth. Doesn't matter what level you are, right? If you're ahead, then you need support and growth at that level. And then this idea of how is he doing in relationship to his peers, because that makes a context. And what I said is that if you click on, let's say he has an assessment score at the end of a unit, if you click on that, then you see all the different work within that unit, and you can click on that and look at different assignments. But what we're giving people right now is the whole tome of information all at once. Most people just need to know, like, how are things going, and then if they want more, they can go get it. So Jamie, you might look at your son, he's in 4th grade, right? Fifth. So you go to 5th grade and you say, he's not doing well in this area of math, this unit. And I'm gonna, okay, for your son, probably not math, but reading.
Whatever he picks and chooses that day.
Yes, okay. Apples and trees. No, I think that he probably, but you would be the parent that would click on it and be like, hey buddy, you gotta work on this type of multiplication because I looked at your test and this is what you did wrong. We're gonna practice. I want you to have that option if you wanna exercise it. The other piece is that a reporting system should be a single page that generates a conversation between a teacher and a parent, not volumes of information that most teachers wouldn't even be able to process and use to inform instruction.
Yep.
So what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it so that the core page that you open up is very user-friendly for the average person to read and get a solid overview. The reasonableness standard applies. Can a reasonable person read this and get an overall picture? And then if that person wanted more information, can they get it quickly and accurately to just at the level, bless you, at the point where you would then call the teacher and say, I don't understand this, I need some help. So you might look at the work and you might look at the notes and be like, yeah, I'm still not getting this. And I even said to the teachers in the room, there might be some times where you put in the notes, I want to talk to you. And then it generates an email to the parent automatically that they want to talk to you to speed that up. Because really what we know is that real-time reciprocal communication is what's going to affect the academic outcomes, I'm not a believer of saying to parents in this day and age with the amount that they have to work and all the things on their plates, look it up and let me know if you need help. That's not going to fly with me. We need to say to parents, I know you're super busy, your kid is struggling here now, and if we don't nip it now, it's going to get worse later. Proactive is way better than reactive, and that breeds trust, and that's the most important thing right now. If we don't breed trust with the community, then we're not going to get their support for what we need, right? I mean, when you go to vote, you wonder, how do you feel about the school that plays in, right? The budget. If you don't trust us and it doesn't feel good, then you're not going to support us. So I think this is way bigger than just grade reporting. It's about communication and the health of our community.
There's also a portfolio piece with this that they're building for us so that kids and teachers can curate evidence of learning over the course of the year. I think probably over the course of multiple years, which is, I think, another nice feature too. It's the communication piece, it's the reporting of the learning, it's the warehousing of the evidence and the learning over time.
Brian, will it house the student-led exhibition stuff like so when the kid has, I love the idea of you showing up to your child's 4th grade conference and the kid walks you through everything that they're working on both sides of this.
Yep.
And tells you the evidence of it, and then the evidence gets scanned into this portfolio so that when they do it as a senior, they show it.
That's what
This is
that's
that.
what it,
I haven't
that's
been a
what
part of
it's-
this part yet.
Yep, that's what it's
where it's-
designed
yep.
to do from what I'm reading in the specs here.
And that's
So-
that's one of the coming attractions things is this portfolio. We didn't get to see it live,
Nope.
but that's one of the things that they
They
told
can
us
take
about.
pictures
They're
of
working
things,
on
they
it.
can paste links, they can upload files.
So it's
again,
really a
this is
housing
like
software for everything that a kid does.
Absolutely, yeah. Which is what, and this speaks to why we wanted to go to this route rather than just taking another canned program that has its pros and cons and making it work, so to speak, because you get what you get with that. We already know what the limitations are of what we have. We don't want to trade one set of problems for another. So this has been great. They've been incredibly responsive to our feedback of what we like, what we don't like, what we want to see. It really is shaping up.
Well, they were okay until I came to the meeting and unloaded on them, and then they were like,
They
"Oh my
were
God."
fine.
No, they're
I'm just
They
kidding.
were fine.
just kidding.
They're really very very good at listening and then
They
addressing
did.
the concerns. They
Right.
really are.
Right.
And providing immediate support. If teachers are having a problem, and even though this is a pilot and this really isn't a live thing because it's not reporting grades, but they will get back to those teachers within 24 hours, sometimes
So when can we walk E.I.S.A through it and put it on the projector and show it to them? Like, I know that so I gave them a lot of feedback just a couple of weeks ago about this core front page. And you were there, and I didn't want to present it to you in a format. There are steps now. So the way I look at this kind of work is that the steps are, this team has done a lot of homework to try to find a solution that addresses the problems with the grade reporting and this system that we've had for a few years. Now I think we're getting close to the point where this group should present something to you for consideration and feedback. And Tammy, what you outlined about the portrait of a graduate, we need to do this right, and we need to do it in steps that people can look at it, think about it, go away and think about it, come back with questions. It's got to be, we're in a deep process phase now.
Mhm.
I think what the committee is saying is that these folks here feel really good about the direction this is going, and they'd like to proceed. I'm not asking you for permission to do that at this point because you can't see it. You need to see it before we do that. So could we plan a time? What's a reasonable timeline for them to start to see it?
They're supposed to come back to us in March, and I've got an email out to them to see what we can set up, because they want to come back and meet with the teachers again and go through another set of refinements. And I'm wondering if end of March, beginning of April, if they can come in, because once they've gone through that next set of refinements and gotten another round of feedback and, okay, how's everything feeling, that they'll be at a place where they'll be able to say to you, okay, because there are a lot of things that they're saying are coming out. You want to give them a chance to develop that, make sure that it's working on their end, make sure that our teachers have had a chance to sort of at least look at it, and then they can probably show that to you probably April.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yep.
Okay, because I'm thinking the March meeting is going to be math.
Well,
Right.
that's a question. We traditionally, or not even traditionally, but we have always, and we've always waited to meet until after the reorganizational meeting and the committee assignments are made. That won't be until the second meeting, the board's second meeting in March, that reorganizational meeting.
Okay.
So we generally, committees tend not to meet in March.
Right.
So-
Well,
Yeah.
I can tell you, well, let's talk about that in a second, because we have some really good news for you around the math piece, and I think that we should talk about that. Because one thing we could do is we could just meet twice in April. That's one strategy. Or we can meet, we can meet whenever, right? We're doing really good work
I
here.
don't have any problem meeting the first, 2 times, whatever.
Yeah,
works.
yeah, let's see how the rest of
Particularly
tonight
in-
goes.
In math, this is a crisis situation.
It is.
So whatever it
Yeah,
takes,
thank you, Jamie.
let's pull up our bootstraps and figure it out, do it.
Yep, and we've done a lot this week, so I wanna give Patty a chance to do that. The motivist thing, I think we're all in agreement we can do in April, right? So it's the math thing that's gonna be,
I have a
More.
clarification question.
yeah, sure.
What is the expectation of daily interaction from a teacher's assistant? Is this like, I'm gonna go in every single day and put something in? I
No.
would think that'd be over,
No, it's
burdensome and
assessment based.
Too much detail, right?
Yeah, a
Right.
couple of thoughts on the teacher things that we've seen. One, that they're, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, I don't think I am, but they're hoping to have full rubrics in the program, so things can get scored live right in the program, so there's no, like, the paper comes out and the parent will be able to see that rubric as soon as they all include kind of a release thing. Like, you don't want, she's got her grade, but I don't have mine, and then you start emailing the teacher.
Yeah.
The other big piece that I was looking for and spent some time talking to them about was coming up with a data profile of students, and I think you've seen some of the ones some of the people in here have, which is kind of a color-coded look at assessment scores and things like that and teacher judgments, and they are building theirs roughly in the model of what I did. I told them they owe me something for that, which is fine. But so that a teacher can access a lot of the data we have on kids. We have this mountain of data, but it can be like getting run over by a bulldozer for teachers, especially at the high school level or at middle school, where you might have 120 kids in math and you've got all this data. You want to make it quick for them to look and see it. And they've been very conscious of that back-end teacher access point all the way along. Because at least a couple of them were classroom teachers. So when they're designing, they're very conscious of that. And that's a big part of it. So it's not just a student tool, a parent tool, administrator tool, but it's also a very well-designed teacher tool.
Because I was gonna say, look, if you can't bring the teachers along, that this is a tool to help them, help the kid and help the parents understand so that both can do more to help the teacher, then it just becomes a burden, and then it becomes, I'm just not spending time on this, and
Becomes useless.
It becomes problematic.
Yeah, I find them very conscious of things like that. Like right now, for our teachers to enter a single grade, to go down the list of things they have to do, they can't just say this is a formative and have all the other stuff fill in automatically. They have to go down and do it. And I know from a teacher perspective, it just kind of, it's like getting that flick finger in your head every time you have to do it. It's annoying. And so I am just certain they're gonna go through it. You're just gonna go forward. It's gonna fill a lot of it in automatically for you.
Those are the things we're
All
working
settings
out.
are there. So it's done, and then once you get the rubric in, and the way we do that stuff and build our rubrics here is very much a team effort. I believe they're gonna be able to write the rubric right in the program. And then that comes in, and then it's just there, and then it's basically a click, the different categories, it creates the calculation of the grade pops right into that student's grade. Saves them a ton of work. And when you do that, it gives them a lot more time to do other stuff with the kids, and it creates that feedback where, your kid hits 7th grade, he's struggling with reading this week, and you wanna know why that assessment didn't go well, you can just open the rubric, and you can see, very much what those issues were for that particular thing, or, what he did really well. Maybe he got a 3, and you're like, wow, you got, 4 in 3 areas, and you got a 3 in this one, he's gonna fix that. There's where the reassessment comes. When are you gonna do it? I scheduled it with my teacher already for tomorrow. There you go.
It's gonna take, the way I look at it is that we get the core front page worked out with the key information, and then some of the backup documents, and then we're gonna grow it over time. It's not gonna all roll out perfectly the way I described it day one. We have to be reasonable with teachers, because if teachers aren't focused on planning and teaching, then our kids aren't learning. This system needs to be a place to house formative and summative information that's over a 3 or 4 week period, not daily updates.
Right.
If a kid needs a daily update, that's
That's
a
a
504
phone
plan.
call.
You know, like that's a whole separate,
Right.
right? Like there's a point where it's just out of control, and I want you to know that one of the biggest things that I think is important is to get teachers focused on teaching and learning instead of computers. Right?
This should be a mirror of what the reality is as opposed to a driver of
Yeah.
the reality.
It needs to do what we need it to do. We don't do what it can do.
And that's,
We're gonna
that's
get
what
it to
we're
do what
planning
we need it to do, and if they can't do that, it won't work. And that's what I told them. I said, it has to do what we need it to do, or it won't work. Because really, ultimately, I'm not gonna have software driving instruction that's backwards, right? It needs to support the teachers. But I wanna get into the math, if that's okay. So Patty prepared this document for you, and she's gonna walk you through it.
So we had established a subcommittee goal, develop a plan to implement improved math instruction. And in looking at what we've done since the beginning of the school year, and actually this goes back to last spring, we know that we need to improve our math instruction. And one of the goals is to prepare students, as many as possible, for the Algebra 1 course in 8th grade. So I have stepped out a timeline for you here, and I will briefly go through that just for the camera, and you can read it in more detail. Last spring, I asked Donna Donnell to pull together a small committee of teachers to look at a bunch of the currently available math programs, knowing that we were not having success with math instruction, and the current program that we've got is not working for us. And in looking at the programs available in the spring, there's a lot of the programs that use the spiraling approach that is similar to everyday math, and the concern with that is that it's not basing student work on fact fluency and mastery of skills in order to be able to do advanced problem solving skills. There's not enough time spent on mastering those skills, working on fact fluency, and some of those foundational pieces that come in with math. The committee identified a promising program that McGraw-Hill has that's possibly coming out, which is coincidentally the same publisher that SAU5, which is Oyster River, is using at their middle level. But they haven't completed their K-5 units. But that program, in addition to a few others that the committee has looked at, is more focused on fact fluency, a better scope and sequence that's going to ensure that those students are progressing in math skills in order to prepare them for advanced problem solving in mathematics. This past September, I took a trip to a conference from the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics to find out more information, see what else is out there as far as materials, as far as programs. And I happened to sit in a session at the conference that had a presenter that was talking about this kind of math program that we're so hungry for. And I mentioned to her that, you know, we would want to talk a little bit deeper and a little bit more detail, and if she could come down to see us here at in Sanborn to talk a little bit about this. So that actually happened in January, and Donna Donnell, the math coordinator, and I met with her to discuss what we're looking for, discuss our concerns, talk about just, you know, the general problems that we're seeing with math instruction. And that discussion resulted in a plan to support improved math instruction. And the plan is laid out here. Establish grade level expectations and aligned curriculum for math in grades K through 7 so that it articulates to Algebra 1 and 8th grade. Provide ongoing professional development to all teachers within the district as coaching and also as training on mathematical instructional practices. Implement math intervention, and to select and implement a program with fidelity. And what that means would be to pick a program that's going to work to do what we need it to do to build those foundational skills, to prepare our students for advanced problem solving, and to do it the way the program's designed to do it. Not to be picking and choosing lessons, picking and choosing activities, to do it the way it's designed to do it. Providing those teachers that professional development, that support, so that they know how to implement that program, so that the students are getting the skills and support that they need to be successful. So in February, both Tom and I spoke with district leaders from SAU5, which is Oyster River, to learn about the success they had based on the article that Jim Baker had shared out with the board about their math scores and their improvements that took them a number of years to do that. And we learned that those scores were a result of several things. So they identified that Algebra 1 in 8th grade was a goal for their students. They have aligned curriculum and grade level expectations. They chose a math program and implemented it with fidelity, doing it the way it's supposed to be done, not changing it up. Provided professional development for all teachers prior to and during and an ongoing basis for mathematics and as well as for that program.
And they still are
And
today.
they're still doing it
They don't-
currently.
It hasn't stopped.
So the plan that I have proposed here at the bottom, for us to move forward to improve our math instruction, because as Jamie identified quite clearly, we are in an emergency situation here. It's not acceptable. We need to provide the Algebra 1 course to 8th grade students, and that's something that we're looking at as a goal. We want to establish grade level expectations and aligned curriculum for math in grades K through 8. We're going to be instituting academic intervention with progress monitoring every 6 to 8 weeks. And progress monitoring is doing assessments of students on what their skills are, see how they're doing. If you've identified an area of need, you give them some instruction on that, then you assess them again to see how they've done on that particular skill, if it's getting better, if it's not getting better, and making adjustments as necessary. Providing professional development to all teachers within the district as coaching and as training from experts on mathematical instructional practices, and to select and implement a math program that balances fact fluency mastery with problem solving that will lead the students through a scope and sequence to Algebra 1 in 8th grade. We need to make sure that we have those fundamental building blocks of math, or we will not have students who are successful at critical thinking. We have to make sure that they're able to do that.
I need to add one thing before we open up the questions.
Yep.
Patty did not articulate, if you look at the second point at the bottom, the proposed plan, which, by the way, when I called Oyster River, I didn't tell them a thing. I said, what did you do? Exactly the same thing. It was great. And Jim and I know each other pretty well, so I chuckled and I said, that's very validating. Thank you, Jim. Right? So Jim Morris, the superintendent, said, the real key was making sure that everyone who possibly could took Algebra 1 in 8th grade and the ongoing PD for teachers. The program's important, but it's for consistency. They had a vote on their program. It won by 1 vote. The 2 elementary schools voted on two or three different programs, and the one they chose won by 1 vote. Now, they all love it because they've been doing it consistently. We have a major problem.
Eureka Math?
Yeah, the Eureka Math, which that's not a program we're looking at. I want to be clear about that. I have experience with that program with my own children, and I do not agree that it's going to meet our needs. However, they chose it 5 years ago. The options were limited at that point. There are other options now that Patty's looking at, and the same company that Oyster River is using created the choices that Patty's looking at, McGraw-Hill. So it's funny because I said to Jim, well, what company are you using? What are the texts? I wanted to dig in because if they picked it 5 years ago, I want to know what updates have been done. What are the, because they may need to buy new textbooks too. And he said, yeah, we're using McGraw-Hill. And sure enough, they're using the Glencoe Math for their upper levels, which we have, but we are not using to fidelity, and we have an old edition. So there's a lot to dig out and figure out what to do there. And one recommendation, and this is my point, is that we didn't talk about 9 to 12 because if you look at number 2, establishing grade level expectations and aligned curriculum for math in K-8, we already have expectations and aligned curriculum for 9, 10, and 11. That's not as much of a problem for us right now. The problem is that they're not getting far enough through it before they take the SAT. So the solution is to get them to do it in 8th grade so that they get there, but that gets into the more than 1 year problem, Jamie. So what Brian has done is he set up intervention for sophomores around math that he's going to talk about right now for just a minute for next year. So I want him to share his thoughts on that.
Just that we're looking at, so in our sophomore schedule, our kids take a bunch of electives, but their core classes consist of English, the sophomore team classes consist of English, social studies, science, and the student interest project period, where they do some of this work in exhibitions. The problem is and that student interest period is a great period for our kids. The reality is some of our kids also need intervention. It has to come from somewhere. We can't create additional time, so we have to decide something's got to come off their plate. So what we're thinking about doing for next year is scheduling all of the sophomores so that they have their student interest period at the same time, and then pulling the kids out who need intervention in either literacy or math, and making that critical decision that you can't have both. The intervention has to come before you could be ready to start doing some of these independent projects. And what we would do is we would front load a couple of English teachers and a couple of math teachers that period to be available along with our reading and our math specialists to do that intervention for kids. And again, it can work in 6 or 8 week segments. It could be targeted based on what the kids need, and we can keep monitoring that throughout the year. I mean, there may be some students who never get to the student interest project because they're doing intervention all year long in literacy and math, and I think that's okay, because that's gonna be more valuable for them. And for our folks, if we were to look at any year where we're gonna try to target and front load the most intervention, everybody agreed that it's that 10th grade year would be the most valuable point to start. So that's what we're looking at trying to do next year, and I think we have the staffing and the schedule set up, so we'll be able to do that.
It's important to note that the freshmen are getting it through the intervention teacher that he put into place this year. So
They
Brian
do,
took-
yeah, so they've already got
So
some of
I just
those,
want to be clear that the freshmen were really first, but it's
Correct.
already happening.
right?
The next, well, you said it like, it's late to do it in the sophomore year. If we can get to them as freshmen,
Yeah.
get them up to speed. I just
We are
want,
getting to them as freshmen.
We are getting to them as
Right,
freshmen.
he's doing
yes,
that now.
but
Sophomores next year, they've already had a year of intervention.
They
Right.
have, yes, but this is gonna be much more targeted and specific and hit a wider net of kids. Whereas right now, what we've been doing with the freshmen has quite honestly been for a much smaller group. We've been targeting a very specific group of kids who are close to, but not at grade level. That was our focus this year. This will be a much wider net, but we'll also have help. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what we're looking to do.
yeah, so Jamie, I wanted you to hear that when we were talking about, it takes multiple years to turn the ship around. I just didn't want to go in, we didn't have time yesterday to go into this, so I
Yeah,
wanted you
right.
to know that we are taking immediate steps.
Right. And to me, just to share some of the conversation, it's crisis mode. It's got to be like a SWAT atmosphere. What do we do? What can we do? What tools are available? How do we apply them? How do we quickly apply them?
Yep.
How do we turn this around? Anybody reading the annual report and seeing those results is just going to sit there, shake their heads in disbelief and say, what the hell is going on?
Trust.
Completely unacceptable activity here.
Mhm.
Might be a lot of good reasons for it, might be doing a lot of good things to address it. Proof's in the pudding at the end. We're printing that, telling people, as we should, this is our reality and it needs to change.
Sure.
And one of the things that I think, I would suggest that it bears some thought is how do you utilize some of the online tools, Khan Academy, Mathnasia, Kuman, how do you pull those in? How do you engage parents? How do you be able to say, well, they should be at this level. This would be a good thing to go to. And this has one way of doing it, and this has another approach. Have your kid try each of those and see what they like better. Tutoring, I know of situations and scenarios where there's internal tutoring, where people at the top end of the game in the school take on as one of their community things or what have you, tutoring the people that are younger in grades, and then it helps the tutorer become more skilled in some of those soft areas and interacting with people, et cetera, and it helps the people on the bottom to learn something, build some relationships across the functions. And then we talked about this, I don't know, back in July or August, is the possibility of there are retired people out in the community that would like to find ways to do things. Can we draw them in and start a math club or something for people to be able to spend an hour or two after school with somebody that used to teach math and loves getting back into it, just to give them something different to do?
Or even during the day.
Yeah, I mean, any of these things that just helps bring focus and attention to this. Because I mean, the numbers are not good, and at the levels that we're looking at, it's just going to be so restricting for these kids going on into the future. I mean, we've got to find a solution.
We are all very concerned for them. For the kids. We are. It has to be fixed. And I've made that abundantly clear. It is, and everyone agrees. It's not like it's a difficult conversation.
Right.
We all know it's serious. So everyone's in agreement, which is good, because it means that we're, Brian came to me with a plan just a few days after we talked. He's like, yeah, let's do this. But I think it's important to recognize that short-term intervention can help raise kids up, but the real answer is a full realignment. So it's three things. It's a full realignment of the curriculum with a specific goal of getting kids into Algebra 1 in 8th grade. So all the backward planning, every decision we make, Jim Morse made it clear to me that he agreed that Algebra 1 in 8th grade was the key. He's got 135 kids. out of 165 in Algebra 1 in grade 8, which is a lot. That's going to be challenging to meet. That's impressive. But hey, high expectations lead to good results, so we're going to go for it. And then the other thing is the ongoing professional development for teachers, because naturally K-5 teachers do not gravitate to math. They don't. They tend to get into it because they're very nurturing. They like to teach reading. You adjust the reading curriculum at K-5 and you watch people go crazy. You talk about math, they're like, yep, just tell me what to do. Okay, so I can tell you that that's really important. And then the third piece, we've already addressed through the reorganization, which is the academic intervention. So it's a three-prong approach. It's not one thing is going to fix this. The academic intervention alone won't fix it. Realigning the curriculum alone won't fix it. And the PD for teachers alone won't fix it. It's all of those things, but most importantly, it's a leadership focus that the board, myself, and the administration are saying to people, whatever it takes, we have to do something about this, because that will bleed out to everyone very quickly. It will bleed out to the community members. They'll hear it, they'll see it, the kids will feel it, right? It has to be action, it can't just be talk, right? It has to be, you're not doing well in math, I'm your English teacher, I saw your math grade, we have a problem here, I'm gonna get you some help. Everybody in the building at every level needs to be looking at kids' grades across the areas and talking to kids about these things, not just their math teacher.
Can I suggest one tiny edit in number 4 of the proposed plan?
Yep.
Add after the word teachers and support staff.
Thank you.
That's huge low-hanging fruit. They need PD, and honestly, some of the best PD we can give them is when we hire one of our math teachers to do training with them on how to coach kids through some of this work, because we rely on our paras to do so much for our kids, and our paras are generally very weak in math. I mean, if you were, they would much prefer to help kids with literacy, reading and writing than they would math. They're hard to come by. So, but it can be, we have the capacity in-house to be able to train them up to feel more confident. So.
Thoughts or questions from?
Okay, we don't have time for too many questions, so, but is there any other at the moment?
Public comment?
Public comment, yes.
Number one is, I think that this plan with this and the way of presenting it, and it was so important. It was the first time I ever heard about it being going on from K through 12, and that it's, not just kind of this pretty little piece of paper. I mean, really, I had no idea what the big picture was. And I'm a big picture person, and then I can break it down to the small components. You can read the little component without giving it a context. And I'm just like, why are you spending all this time on it? So I think that's really, really important in your presentation. And I think, so that's great. I also feel that the percent, I don't know what percent of our parents participate in parent-teacher conferences or are not very active with their children, but it seems to me that giving them this information, I know I was, but if I'd had this kind of information to be able to work with my kids, I would have done a better job.
Do you mean the portrait of a graduate piece? Is that what you're?
Yeah, I'm referring to
yeah,
that part.
yeah,
I think it's going to be very useful information. The report card thing, the same thing, with being able to dig in and to look and to see where I could help them. I was a very active parent, so I would do that. I would think parents that aren't so much would be more motivated to get more involved because you're going to give them tools to do stuff. So I like that. Are you still using Math 1, 2, 3?
We are still using Math 1, 2, 3, yes.
Okay.
Well, so we just started using that a couple years ago.
Right.
That was a rehab, yes.
So kids really are getting my understanding is they get some algebra, some trig, some geometry all together.
Correct.
So when you do that, are you going to put like Math 1 into 8th grade?
Yes.
I mean, you're talking about
we're going to
algebra.
talk about that, but
Right.
yes, theoretically, but I think that's a big question, Annie. And the other question is, there's a lot of questions, or I have a lot of questions. As always, when you start to unpack something, you find more.
Mhm.
So I have a lot. Patty and I met today with Donna, and we have questions for you, and we have questions about Algebra 1 versus a traditional Algebra 1 geometry, Algebra 2 versus the way it's set up now. I need to do some more investigating and understand
And
what
that's
Brian's
fine.
thinking. And
Yeah, and that's fine. And quite honestly, the Math 1, 2, 3 came about a couple years ago because working with our math teachers, that was a critical need, that it needed to be an integrated approach. that was gonna be best for our kids. I think the reality is if we're improving their skills at the foundation level, it's inherently gonna improve the high school level, whatever we do, because a lot of the issues we encounter at the high school level come about because our folks are reteaching foundational skills that the kids should already have that they just haven't mastered.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality of it, which is why it's taking them longer to get through whatever curriculum you're gonna have at the high school.
All I can say is this is the public piece of this right now. There's a lot of work going on behind this that
Yeah.
we're not showing yet because we're not ready.
And that was the.
And it has to do with the middle school instruction, the middle school sequencing,
And Fremont.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
right
That
on.
was all, that was.
Great
all
to
good.
see.
Should I read anything into the public piece was upside down and held up?
Yes.
or-
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Sorry, did
Well,
I do
then
that?
this is how busy we are that we don't even have
Flip
time
it
to turn
upside
the
down.
paper the
No,
right way.
Patty, thank you, you did a great job on
And the
this.
move when ready piece, which is another element too, that's starting to roll out.
Okay, so we don't have a meetings, we don't really have a next meeting.
I asked Pam if we could have one on the 4th.
Okay,
I'm
you asked
getting-
Pam?
Well, she has a policy meeting.
If we
I
can
asked her if we
take
should
over
do
the
policy earlier and we could meet at 4:45, so let me get back to you. That's the
Okay.
easiest way to do it before the vote, is to do it that night. So I'll work my thing, I'm on.
I'm sorry, say that again before the vote.
Before the,
You mean in March?
Election.
yeah, you were saying that you were concerned about the elections and
Yeah.
having a committee meeting. The easiest way to do that is to do an ISA meeting on the 4th and talk about math,
Oh, okay.
right? So, we could make it like a math only, we could invite some teachers.
Well, do we
could-
want
That'd be
portrait
good.
of a graduate?
Oh, yeah, but you are the chair, and if you'd like to have Portrait of Graduate back on there for time to contemplate and have a little bit of, like, you asked for that, and I think that this committee should make the decision about this because you've worked on it all year. Like, you've had input all year. So maybe we should have 15 or 20 minutes on this and then the rest on math. Sound good?
I'm sure Ellie would like to close the circle on this.
I would.
I think she'll just skip the meeting personally, but it's up to you guys.
I've never skipped.
I know, never.
But it would be, but you don't have a time, you don't have that
Not that
confirmed
I
yet.
didn't.
No, I don't, but I'm gonna say tentatively 4:45 on the 4th.
On this day, it's-
And if I have to jiggle things around with Pam, Pete, and Larry, I will make that happen. But I don't wanna speak for Pam until I talk to her, I'm just saying I've already asked her.
I'm so relieved.
Okay.
We're moving in these directions.
We should see her in about 3 minutes.
Yeah, and you know how Pete gets when I'm not in there right at 6 o'clock.
This is
Yeah.
great.
Gets very anxious.
Thank you. That's good.